Welcome to Anti-Woke and Autistic. Have you noticed the inconsistency and the hypocrisy of Instagram? Check this out. When I type the word fat in Instagram, the first of a ton of results come up. Instagram has no problem whatsoever with the word fat. But when I type in the word thin, look at the result that I get. Can we help? Well, first of all, Instagram cannot help me in any shape, way, or form as far as my mental health, my ability to live successfully and effectively. So forget that. But they're saying words you're searching for are often associated with sensitive content. Well, isn't fat also related to sensitive content? It continues here. If you're going through a difficult time, we've gathered some resources from experts that we hope can help. Get support, click on that, and I have not clicked on it. See results anyway. So they do allow you to see the results of the keyword of thin, but the point is they're showing a warning, for lack of a better word, but with the word fat, there's no such thing. Same thing if you type in fat body. You get this is the first of four. I only cropped down to the fourth, and you'll even see a hashtag for fat body. But when I type in thin body, I get that same disclaimer or whatever you want to call it. All right, look at this. I type in thigh chafing here, which is strongly associated with fat thighs or thick or heavy thighs or thunder thighs, whatever you want to refer to it. And it's a product. There are thigh chafing creams for thighs that rub together. So maybe they allow thigh chafing here. They allow the results without some kind of warning or disclaimer because there are thigh chafing creams, and they probably assume there's content about solutions to thigh chafing. But what causes thigh chafing? Excess body fat. And we all know that excess body fat is not healthy. Now, what if I put in the opposite of thigh chafing? Thighs that are overweight and as a result are too close together, and so they rub together and cause chafing. I put in thigh gap, I get that warning again. What's interesting is that not every skinny pair of thighs have a noticeable gap. And I've seen thigh gaps, I've seen gaps in thighs that would not be considered thin or even slender. I've seen gaps in thighs that would be considered straight size or even muscular or a little bit, just very slightly on the thick side. And I've seen slender thighs that didn't have a gap. Instagram is really confused. Now, if I type in fat waist, again, you get results including the hashtag of fat waist. Instagram has no problem with content about a fat waist. They don't think it warrants any kind of disclaimer or warning, even though doctors will tell you that fatness in the waist, visceral fat, is the most dangerous kind of fat because it gets into the organs literally, like gristle in a steak. Ever see a steak or a cut of meat with all that gristle in it? That's what visceral fat does to your organs. It puts pressure on all your organs. The more of it you have, the more it suffocates your organs and puts strain on the heart. But they're okay with the word fat waste and with the hashtag fat waste. But if you put in tiny waist, oh no, here we go again. Guess what? I don't know if, now I'm not a doctor, but you can search this, you can ask your doctor. A tiny waist, whatever that's defined as, a small waist, a waist like Elizabeth Taylor used to have when she was a movie star, a small waist, a tiny waist, it's not the cause of organ problems or damage or strain on the heart and all that other bad stuff that a fat waist is. A thin waist may be as well, it's always a symptom. Everybody who has anorexia nervosa or is underweight due to a starvation diet or malnutrition, they all have tiny waists. But just because somebody has a tiny waist doesn't mean they're unhealthy. It does not mean they have an eating disorder or anorexia nervosa. It does not mean they're malnourished or suffering from some kind of restrictive eating disorder or some kind of psychological disorder or other medical condition. It just means that's the way they're built. They have a small waist, especially if they're a competitive bodybuilder or figure competitor. Have you ever seen the waists of male bodybuilders? I mean, they have really small waists, but they're anything but unhealthy unless they're on steroids. But I'm talking about natural bodybuilders. Usually they eat very healthy diets, but a tiny waist in and of itself, just in and of itself, is not indicative of something bad or unhealthy. But a fat waist means a person is overweight, likely is obese, morbidly obese, possibly. Every obese person has a fat waist. A fat waist is strongly associated with medical conditions. It's visceral fat, it hurts the organs. A tiny waist doesn't do that. Now, again, I'm not talking about a tiny waist on somebody with anorexia nervosa. I'm talking about just what would be considered a tiny waist. Many healthy, fit people have what would be considered a tiny waist. I don't know why Instagram has a problem with this. Fat and beautiful. If somebody feels beautiful and they're fat, that's something that they have a right to feel. That's them. They're doing them. And there's just, again, I cropped it at 4, but a ton of results came up. No warning, no disclaimer. Thin and beautiful. What's Instagram trying to tell us here? What message are they sending? Is this a form of thin shaming? If Instagram had a warning like this for the keywords of fat and beautiful, the body positive community, especially the fat acceptance community, fat activism, they would be up in arms. They would be screaming about this. If there was this kind of warning for the key phrase of fat and beautiful, they would be having the biggest tantrum. But it's okay to put a warning for thin and beautiful. Is there something wrong with thin women who feel beautiful? Is it a crime for a thin woman to feel beautiful in her naturally thin beauty, in her naturally thin body? I'm not talking about an anorexic. I'm not talking about Eugenia Cooney feeling beautiful. I'm talking about a woman who's healthy but naturally thin. She doesn't have a big appetite. She doesn't overeat. She only eats when she's hungry. She doesn't eat when she's full. She has a healthy diet. She exercises, drinks plenty of water. She's healthy. Her doctor says she's healthy, but she has a naturally fast metabolism. Maybe she runs a lot. Maybe she's an athlete, does a lot of running. Maybe it's just runs in the family, just the so-called thin genes. Why does Instagram have a problem with this? Again, if Fat and Beautiful elicited this disclaimer, a lot of fat activists would be really, really upset, mad, angered, and upset. But it's okay to say thin and beautiful warrants a warning. Why is that considered by Instagram to be a sensitive subject, but fat and beautiful isn't? Fat and beautiful? That's like saying unhealthy and beautiful. Fat is inherently unhealthy. You can be fat and strong. There are videos and images of morbidly obese people deadlifting and bench pressing and squatting a lot of weight. Yeah, I mean, I'm not challenging that, but fat is always unhealthy. Obesity is always unhealthy. Thin, depending on how you define it, is not inherently unhealthy. You could be thin and sick, yes, but the sickness isn't from having a naturally slender, lean, trim, slim body. If you're anorexically thin, yes, you are 100% of the time in very, very dangerous health. You can drop from cardiac arrest at any time. But thin, that can mean so many things. That can mean the body of, what's her name? Jennifer Aniston. But I would hardly call Jennifer Aniston anorexic. She's no Eugenia Cooney, for instance. Well, okay, if I put fatso in there, no problem. Thinspo. Why is that a problem with Instagram? Thinspo refers to thinspiration. Thinspo is like the abbreviation for the word thinspiration. And Thinspiration, I believe, used to be a very popular hashtag, but Instagram deleted it. But it's okay to have all sorts of hashtags that are synonymous with obesity celebration. There's many different ways to word that. Fat love, fat beauty, big and beautiful. There's so many words, word combinations that can be equated with fat inspiration, and Instagram doesn't have a problem with that. Go ahead, play around with it, type them in, and you'll see all sorts of stuff comes up without these disclaimers. But Thinspiration? Well, I think the problem with Thinspiration was that many anorexics were posting to that hashtag ways to get dangerously underweight, tips on how to become anorexic or how to get down to 75 pounds. I never saw the content under the hashtag of Thinspiration or Thinspo. Maybe most of it was anorexics promoting anorexia. All right, I can understand if Instagram decided to ban that. I can understand that, but I don't know that for sure if most of the content under Thinspiration or Thinspo was related to anorexia nervosa. But again, all these other examples that I've shown you, I'm sure the vast majority of the content was innocent. There's always going to be somebody who's offended. There's always going to be somebody who's overly sensitive, very soft, very weak minded, very insecure. There's always going to be somebody who's overly sensitive, especially in today's day and age where playing the victim, having a victim mentality is encouraged. So the opposite of, well, first I want to say mukbanging. Mukbanging is a trend where people stuff themselves with enormous amounts of food while being filmed. I think it originated out of Korea, and there's videos of people who are not overweight, including women, who have a bunch of food in front of them, and they're shown consuming all this food all at once, all in one sitting allegedly. People are stupid enough to believe that this tiny little woman has actually eaten what appears to be enough food for 5 men, enough food that 5 men would eat, but they don't consider that they don't actually show her, the filming doesn't show her swallowing the food. She puts it in her mouth, she chews, then the video jumps. It jumps. So it's obviously been edited and snipped out where she spits out the food. And if you read up on this, that's exactly what they do. Yet people are stupid enough, naive enough, gullible enough to believe that she's actually eaten all of that. They don't show her eating it without interruptions, and clips snips parts of the portions of the film being deleted out. They don't show her swallow. Oh, they might show her swallowing like one out of every 8 or 9 forkfuls or mouthfuls, but they don't show it all at once. Now, somebody like, what's her name here? Hungry Fat Chick. She has a pile of food in front of her, and she's like 450 pounds at least. She actually eats everything. There's no editing, there's no jumping. You can tell it's just a straight video, straight through. She actually eats everything. And that's a true mukbang where you eat everything without any breaks, without any editing. So it's okay by Instagram mukbanging, but you put the opposite of mukbanging, anorexia nervosa. You're literally subsisting on a level of food that people who are starving, literally starving in developing countries due to severe food shortages and famine, they're literally starving. If you induce that starving on purpose, it's called anorexia nervosa. So that's the opposite. That can be seen as the opposite of mukbanging. And Instagram has a problem with anorexia nervosa, but they don't have a problem with mukbanging. However, interestingly, Instagram has an issue with binge eating, and I'm not faulting them for that. It's just, I was quite surprised that binge eating comes up here with this disclaimer. I was really surprised. And also, I don't have it here, but the word eating disorder also comes up with a warning. But eating disorder could also mean compulsive overeating or binge eating or overeating. So fat liberation. No problem with Instagram, even though, according to the Centers for Disease Control, obesity kills 350,000 Americans every year. It's the second leading cause of death by a lifestyle choice, or maybe it's the first, maybe it's ahead of smoking. It kind of alternates. The smoking is the number one cause of preventable death. Yet it's okay for Instagram to just have fat liberation here without any warning. I don't get it. Fat celebration again, as you can see, no problem here. Ditto for fat acceptance. No problem. In other words, let's accept a condition that's lifestyle driven, obesity, particularly morbid obesity, that should never be accepted. Fat acceptance. Maybe Instagram interprets that to mean if you're fat, you should still have confidence and hold yourself high. If you're fat, you should still have confidence and hold your head high. Maybe that's why Instagram doesn't think it's sensitive. Fat acceptance. That is a sensitive topic to people who have lost loved ones to obesity. That's a very sensitive topic for them. So that's really something to think about. Why we have this hypocrisy and inconsistency with Instagram. It's also rampant in TikTok. Again, I don't spend a lot of time on TikTok, but just from what I've read or I've seen YouTubes about this, TikTok has banned weight loss ads, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's okay for TikTok to have a ton of women, morbidly obese women, on there talking about how great and wonderful it is to be fat and how sexy they are and beautiful they are. They literally promote and celebrate morbid obesity, a very dangerous condition. So that's all for today. It's just something to really think about. Play around with these keywords on Instagram. It's just incredible how inconsistent Instagram is and how they've subscribed to a very woke culture. That's it for now. Have a wonderful day.